All right, we are live on that PNW YouTube channel. This is the PNW podcast, episode 3 with Matt Fawcett. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing well. How are you?
I am well, as well as can be for being kind of cooped up.
Yeah.
The funny thing about it is I was self isolated before it was the thing to do. Because I'm a fairly private person as it is,
Yeah.
but now you know it helps me out when I go to the store because there's less people there. So
Yeah.
usually, but either way. So welcome to the PNW podcast. The discussion today is basically your music ministry that you've got, the songs that you've released, some of which I get to hear quite often during your live streams that you do.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Um, I know that you rotate them out, which is always good because I think it's like maybe one song during your lunch break or something like that.
Yep. Yeah,
So
typically.
if anyone's interested and you want to have a really good idea of something to do at lunchtime, if you happen to have a guitar with you, let's go live on your phone. Hashtag, what is it? It's called lunch
Lunch
break,
break.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hashtag lunch break. And sing a song and help brighten somebody's day. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because honestly, the since all this quarantine stuff is going on, most people didn't do it a whole lot. I was kind of surprised at least larger or bigger known artists didn't do it unless they were promoting a show or an album or so it was just kind of interesting because I had my guitar at work and actually took a piano once or twice and played that too. But yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to literally just play music, stuff that I was going to do anyway, and then share it with other people. And that's really the whole point behind lunch break was to share music with other people and still have the work-life balance of spending time with my family after work was over, but still being able to reach people while I'm at work.
That's always a plus.
Yeah.
That's
For
that's
sure.
always a plus because
Yep.
not everyone, regardless of their profession, some people actually could carry travel guitars or a small guitar with them, and it's not really that big of a deal to do that at lunchtime
Mm-hmm.
if they dedicate the time to do it, if you will.
Yeah,
Before we go too much further, would you go ahead and open us up in prayer?
for sure. Dear God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the ability to praise and worship you with every breath that we have in our bodies and with just being able to live life in a way that honors and glorifies you. I pray that you help us through our discussion today as we're just talking about a lot of different things, that you'll be glorified and honored, and that we'll become better worshipers of you because of it. In your name I pray, amen.
All right. What was your motivation? Well, I know what your motivation was to start the lunch breaks. What led to, hey, this would be a good idea to do that?
It honestly was a podcast or a video of that Rick Barker, who most people know him because of being the manager for Taylor Swift when she kind of broke out. He was doing, I believe it was a session at the CD Baby Music Do-It-Yourself Music Conference. And basically had just talked about anytime you have a chance to go live, you just should. As a musician, if you're trying to get your music out there to other people, anytime you go live can be a positive experience in a way that you can reach into somebody's home. Because for a lot of times, especially with independent artists, the hardest part is distribution of your music. Anybody can sit down and write a song. At this point in time, even with equipment and gear, you can at least record it and get a pretty decent product out of it if you're willing to spend the time and effort into learning how to use the equipment to do it. And a lot of people are doing it. I mean, Billie Eilish which completely different genre, but her entire record was recorded in their bedroom. Her and her brother working on that together. Now it was, mixed and mastered elsewhere, but the grand majority of that record was all done in, a 6x8 foot space in their house. So he had mentioned basically anytime you get a chance to just go live, because distribution wise, you have the ability to step into people's lives literally by just having their phone open. So anybody that follows me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, literally gets an opportunity to hear from me most every day and hear music, some of it my own, sometimes doing covers. It was literally just the thought of, wow, like I can pretend that the biggest hurdle is somebody not believing in me enough, when really the biggest hurdle is myself not believing that what God's given me as far as the songs and the passion for reaching other people, that's really my biggest hurdle is myself. And the fastest way to get over it is to not try to get everything perfect, but is literally just to start doing it and then work on doing it better and better each and every time.
Well, that's very true. You know, I can't remember the source of this, but it was once said to me that your biggest enemy is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a YouTuber with Think Media is the channel. I can't remember the guy's name, Sean Cannell, I think. But anyways, he says you just got to press record. Sometimes you just have to just get in there and do it.
Yep.
I will say this real quick to anyone watching or anyone watching later. There is a slight issue with the audio that comes and goes. My apologies about that. Sometimes technical difficulties just happen. But so when it comes to playing your original songs, I mean, I guess was there a massive fear factor? I mean, I critique myself really hard, but is there like a fear factor of what are they going to think of my song? Are they gonna like it? Are they gonna say mean things? Are they gonna give me positive feedback? These are things that run
Yeah.
through my brain. I'm just curious if they run through yours as
Oh,
well.
for sure. I used to a lot. So my first major gig that I ever did in, I think it was, I'm trying to remember if it was high school or college. It was a local coffee shop, and I grew up in a really small town. It was like 3,000 people tops. And then when the school was in session, it was another 3,000 people. So it was like 6,000 altogether at any one time, which is super small town, Ohio. And the first gig I did, it was 3 hours long, and it was all original music. And I was like, my eyes were bloodshot. I was super, super nervous. And the people were asking me like if I was okay before I even started, because I was freaking out. But I'd been leading worship in church since I was in junior high or before that. So I'd been in front of people playing music, but it was never my own stuff. And so the first couple of gigs were super, super nerve wracking. And I actually got super nervous even whenever I play new places that I don't know the people that are going to be there. Because it's one thing to play in church. You understand that most people are kind of at the same belief system, or at least pretty close to it. And they kind of understand the subject matter you're going to be talking about. But there are places that if you don't know who owns the place, what they believe or what they think, there can be actually a pretty big hurdle of figuring out like, okay, do I truly believe this enough to not care whatever other people think, but I want people to really know what, because all art is basically explaining life the way that you see it. So I see it through the lens of the gospel. Other people see it through the lens of whatever drives them or whatever their major truth is, whether especially if it's their own, if they find source of truth in and of themselves. Um, and that thought process is actually what got me away from being nervous about presenting my own songs, especially in places that weren't churches, because I knew that if I go in there and I'm preaching because I have the right answer and I just think it's going to change everybody's mind, it's not going to come off as well as if I just go in and just share my heart and share my perspective of life with other people. And at that point in time, playing my music, which is definitely gospel centered, but may not be played on Sunday morning for worship time necessarily, not all of them at least, it freed me up to realize that I can play for anybody, anywhere, and not have to be nervous, not have to worry so much that people are going to reject me. If they're going to reject the message, it's them rejecting the gospel, not necessarily me personally. And if they do reject me personally, you kind of have to grow thick skin on some level and just, not everybody's going to like me and that's
Yeah.
okay. And if they don't like me, that's all right. But I still need to love them. And the best way I can love people through music is literally just playing for them. And however they receive that is on them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, giving people choices and options is always a good
Mhm.
thing. I led worship at my previous church for 3 years, and um, it was a smaller congregation,
Hmm.
and that was a very humbling experience and practical application of you can't please everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't please everybody. Everyone has an opinion,
Yep.
and opinions are like elbows. Everyone's got a couple,
Yep. Oh, for
So,
sure.
especially with the style of music and all this other stuff. But either way, when it came down to it, the pastor and I had a game plan, and we just, stayed strong with a mission to know Christ and make Him known through music.
Yeah.
Um, so what kind of places besides your house right now, in a normal world environment, would you be would you be playing? Because I've seen you
Yeah.
play at coffee shops, which is my favorite.
Hmm.
I've even seen you open for 10th Avenue North,
Yep.
which
That
is
was a blast.
fantastic. And then I've
Yeah.
seen you do live streams, live concerts from your living room, I guess it is.
Hmm.
So, I did I just name them all?
The only thing I think you haven't named is a barn. I did a show actually for Grace College. Their business department put on a fall festival party type thing for their students. And so they had me come out and do live music for them. And it was literally in the top of somebody's barn, which was super cool. But because it was on the second floor, we had to carry, and I played the show solo. My setup is a little ridiculous currently for just being me. And so we had five Chauvet Q spots, which weigh 75 pounds each. Those all had to go upstairs. A piano had to go upstairs, plus the system and everything else. So load in and load out was pretty ridiculous for that one. But yeah, it's mostly coffee shops, churches. I've done a couple of different like festivals, outdoor festivals, not specific to the church, but then I've played in a couple of different quasi like coffee shop bars as well, or breweries is another one, and then played at some wineries as well too, which is interesting because before all this COVID-19 stuff happened, my main push was actually for doing house concerts. So actually going to people's homes and then playing concerts in their own home, which is kind of weird because right now it's literally doing concerts for people out of my own home, and they just get to get to sit in the comfort of their couch and watch on their iPhone. So
Yeah. Well, depending on your bandwidth. Now, I live in the like mile outside the city limits of a really small town,
mhm.
and the next town over is a major college town. They've got fiber optics and massively high-speed internet. In this town, we don't. So I have DSL. So what I'm streaming right now, the audio is okay, but the video quality is going to come off like less than standard definition.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to the music, like I did a stream yesterday on a different channel, and I had my guitar and had a patch on my Helix going, and the sound came through okay.
Hmm.
Um, so I would, even though when you're streaming to Facebook or YouTube, it gives you a bit of compression.
Yep.
I would recommend to them put on some headphones or put it through your system or stream it to your TV or something like that. That would be great too to get a little bit
Oh yeah, for
better
sure.
feel for the music, I think. And it's a little bit more like, okay, well now I've done this, so let's sit down and enjoy it rather than just eh,
Pop
and
in.
then you
Yeah.
clip
Pop in
off. Yeah.
and out. Yep.
Um, yeah, I I like the concept of, streaming concerts and having a good time when you have the bandwidth for it.
Hmm.
Um, what I'm kind of still I'm surprised how well it is given how little bandwidth I have.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that makes sense. And it honestly, like the hard part for everybody, including churches right now, is literally quality. And there are definitely some different ways you can do things to try to get better quality, but there's trade-offs with that too. So is the benefit going live and physically being there to talk to people back and forth, or higher quality? Um, and that, like for me, actually, when we got our internet at our house, I think it's through, I don't remember who the provider is. but it's FiOS internet, like some of the fastest fiber optic stuff that they had. And we called the guy and said, hey, like, we want to get this. He's like, where are you? We're like, oh, Northern Indiana. He's like, yeah, there's no way that's out there. Or like, listen, I got the flyer in the mail. I would assume they knew where they were sending it to. And he's like, holy cow, it actually is there. So we were blessed with actually having some pretty fast internet at our house and in the area. But that's the trade-off. Like, that's a hard thing. That's why broadcast on TV still exists, and it's not completely swarmed by just people shooting stuff on their iPhones, is because there's definitely a jump between having a full-fledged broadcast on PBS or wherever versus somebody shooting it off their iPhone.
Well, my brother, I mean, I live in Northwest Tennessee, and my brother lives in Memphis. Why he lives in Memphis, I don't know, but he lives in Memphis, and he has been for years. And they've got fiber optics down there, but they have a budget. I mean, they have more of a budget like that. And the college town just north of me got a grant, and they were able to get fiber optics like that. My hillbilly neighborhood, no, but it's very doubtful we'd ever get it.
Yeah.
Unless I won the lottery, and I don't play the lottery, so I'm not going to win.
That definitely lowers your odds quite a bit.
Yeah. So how my church has been doing this right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the topic matter currently is live streaming.
Yeah.
And that seems like what's consuming the internet right now is live streaming. And my church, we had another internet provider that was not giving us the promised bandwidth. So they switched to fiber optics, and all of a sudden, wow, it's there. And even so, we're not doing live streams for our main services. We're pre-recording them and then uploading them. So they're in great, you know, there's no live compression or anything to it. It's just whatever we upload. The college service is still live streamed.
Okay.
And the worst case scenario, we used an iPad.
Yeah.
And best case scenario, it's running through our Behringer X32 into the Blackmagic video switcher.
Okay.
And that straight into the Mac that runs OBS or whatever streaming software they use. So you can go simple.
Yep.
Here's a cell phone. Or you can go crazy and all these mixed stuff. But it's funny that you're talking about crazy load in and load outs. And that is not an exaggeration. For anyone watching doesn't know what a load in or load out is when you bring your equipment in to wherever you're playing, you set it up, and then once you're done, you have to tear it back down and haul it out. And I'm 34. So I kept telling a lot of people, because I, have a lot of stuff too. I was like, you know what? If I had kids when I was 18, they'd be old enough now to carry all this stuff for me.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, but that's how my brain was thinking anyways.
Oh man. Well, the funny thing is, so that week, even though it was one flight of stairs to get to the top of the barn, the weekend before, we did a show actually in my hometown in an opera house that the venue is amazing. It is absolutely beautiful. Old school opera house, full of creaks every single time somebody takes a step. Absolutely beautiful. But I had help getting into that one because I had a bass player and a guitarist that played with me that night. But that was essentially like 3 stories up. And there was no elevator. And again, it's a super old building, so there's no there is no easy way to get in there other than just carrying everything up the stairs. So same amount of gear, same piano, like everything went all the way up. And we got there late in the afternoon and literally we're setting everything up, played the show, and then tore it all back down, and then drove back to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I live, and then had to be at church the next morning at 7 a.m. So we got in at 3 a.m. I unloaded the trailer, dropped my bass player off, and then went and dropped the trailer off, got home, slept for about 2.5 hours, got up, took a shower, and then went to church. So yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of excitement that always goes on with that stuff.
Well, yeah, that what you're just talking, except for the sleep, which is kind of typical of lack of sleep. That what you just described is a fairly ideal scenario. I know that vehicles can break down, like when you're in Virginia or something.
Yeah, it's happened a couple of times.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I ran sound for a fundraiser. That's what it was a few years ago, and I used I have have the rack set up with my Behringer XR18. I was using a Bose L1 Compact as the PA, and it filled the medium-sized room fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
And the rack was just unbelievably heavy, and I had mic stands and microphones, and luckily I had help. And the only reason I had help is because I think the local jail loaned some trustees our way, some
Yeah.
some inmates that have been released for work,
Mm-hmm.
which helped. I
Yep.
think they were the ones that really helped us out. So my hats off to them for being proactive while they were out. Um, and I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it even got to a point, and this is where musicians really don't quite have it figured out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are times where something's going to get thrown in, and you're going to have to just go with it. And I'll
Yep.
give you an example. We had 3 acts to play that night, and
Mm-hmm.
one didn't show up for whatever reason. So another one came up impromptu, and thankfully it was just 2 singers and a guitar player.
Yeah.
So I said, plug into this DI, and I'll have to mix you guys on the fly. So just start singing, and I'll start mixing knobs. So I only had 3 knobs to turn, 3 levels.
Yeah.
Made it work. But
Yeah. Yeah. I try to plan as much for the maximum amount of flexibility, but it means you have to be prepared for almost any situation, which at times can be pretty, can cause headaches sometimes, just depending on how much you're trying to plan for. And that's honestly, like, my rig is ridiculous, and way overblown for a single singer songwriter, but it's built to grow so that I can have other people play with me. Because there are times where I'll have Brandon who plays bass for me, or Ryan who plays guitar. I'm working on onboarding a couple of drummers right now. So, like, the hope is, like, usually the way it does is I'll book a gig and let everybody know, and for sure it'll be at least me if I can do it, and then we see how many other people can actually play on that same show, and then that determines kind of how big the show is going to be. But then, I still do lights and backing tracks and everything else too, so it still feels full. It's just, as more people can come, there's less in the tracks and everything else, so that it is more live with people there.
well, let's put this in a little bit more perspective, though.
Yeah.
You've got. I've seen a video you did recently,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember now. But anyways, I remember a keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
and of
Yep.
course your sound system. You have your rack. You had a couple guitars, but I know you were playing. That was the teleacoustic
Yeah.
or
Acoustic
acoustasonic.
console.
Yeah.
Yep.
And probably another guitar as a backup. You had
Mm-hmm.
your DMX lighting, um, and there was a sign that said Matt Fawcett right behind you.
Yep.
Uh, but the thing that I want people to realize, all these things that I named off, uh, mixers, backing tracks, pads, the whole 9 yards, lights, it's all completely automated
Mm-hmm.
using Ableton Live.
Yep.
And Ableton Live, I think, is the praise and worship go-to DAW, and probably the least buggy DAW that I've ever
Yeah.
used.
Yep.
Um, I just love the concept of you set it up, test it, test it again,
Mm-hmm.
and then saving it periodically throughout it. And then typically, unless your computer crashes, it should work just fine.
Yeah. Which that's why I use it, is because it's literally a blank slate. And as far as um, getting MIDI in and out, because that's how all that other stuff is controlled, is literally, the way my session is set up is there's tracks that are in there, and then for every single MIDI path, as far as information go out or things that I want to control, it has its own MIDI channel. So the lighting is all on 1 or 2, depending on how I want to control them. But then so that sign, one gig that I did, the projector was having some issues, but I actually have automated lyrics on a projector that are going the exact same time as everything else is going too. So there's a couple of MIDI tracks just for the lyrics, so it knows when to switch to what song, and then inside of that song, when to go from lyric to lyric, so it actually matches up with the actual song itself.
And that would be using Pro Presenter, right?
It would be. Right now, I'm using OnSong to be able to do that just off my iPad. But
Okay.
ideally, I would switch. I would like to switch eventually to Pro Presenter, just because there's a lot more that you can do with Pro Presenter, and being able to key things differently. Right now, just with the way my rig's set up, it's easier. It's literally my iPad, um, screening over to an Apple TV, and then that's all on a network. The Apple TV is connected to a network switch that's connected to my Mac, so that all that is just it's all hard connected, other than the iPad connecting to the Apple TV.
Yeah, and that's
And they're
very
literally sitting right next to each other, so they won't disconnect. But I
yeah.
needed to make sure that the MIDI stuff got there without any latency. Otherwise, it would, because there's two triggers to start every song. There's a trigger to actually get to that song, so I don't have to create or change set lists. So every single song that I have has a specific MIDI note that's just for that song. So as soon as I hit play on that song, it goes to that song, puts the background, and makes sure that the entire lyric slide is all the way at the beginning, and then hits with the first one, depending on how quickly those lyrics come up. So I needed that all to be as quickly as possible without any latency. Otherwise, if one of them hit wrong or at the same time, it wouldn't fire correctly.
Yeah, so to put this in perspective, obviously for anyone watching,
Mm-hmm.
MIDI uh, is such a useful thing to use. You can sync everything up, and and it's the easiest thing to screw up.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
Jake Goslin with Churchfront is all about tech savvy worship, and he is all about Ableton and automation. It frees up people to volunteer for other things,
Yeah.
and so on. So there's a lot more in depth videos talking about how deep you can go, how deep the rabbit hole goes with MIDI. But when you've got all these things and it's just you, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm guessing you tech for yourself. You
Yep.
know, most of us do.
Yep.
so
100%.
so you can. It might take a couple of trips, obviously, but I mean, you could load in for yourself, set it
Yeah.
up yourself, and test it yourself. Sound check. Well, hopefully somebody else would help you with that. You
Mm-hmm.
could potentially sound check yourself, but that's kind of a touchy subject, I guess. And then tear it all down and put it back up yourself.
Yep.
Um, so it's amazing when it comes to stuff like that. I wouldn't mind getting some lights for here for when I'm doing stuff, put a background,
Yeah.
behind me and stuff like that. Because I've got some music that I'm throwing, putting together and gonna
Yeah.
eventually release it. I've been talking about doing for years now.
No better time
But
than the present.
I know, right? So speaking of that, though,
Yeah.
your latest record
Mm-hmm.
is available and it's for sale
It
now.
is.
I
Yep.
will, I will, I won't literally do this, but it seems like I might shoot myself in the foot if the latest record is not in the gray.
So the latest full length record is in the gray.
Okay,
There have been a couple of EP releases,
yeah, you
and
released a hymn EP, didn't you?
yeah, so there's a hymn EP, and then there was a radio show that we did here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that I ended up releasing as an acoustic EP, and it was literally me and my bass player that just went in and did this radio interview, and they gave us the tracks for it afterwards. I ended up releasing as an acoustic EP, which is kind of interesting because usually as a duo, you don't necessarily have like an electric bass and acoustic guitar, and but it was cool. So we ended up releasing that one too. But yeah, In the Gray is the most recent full length album that I have out.
Yeah. That is obviously for sale. People can purchase that from anywhere that they can get digital music at. Correct.
Correct. Yep.
All right, but they can also get an album for free, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Yep. So what I would call my first serious recording project, because I did some recording stuff in college, and I was still learning a whole lot. But the first real serious one that I did was it's called Trade It All. And that one people can get for free if they go to fawcettmusic.com. They just type in their email address so I know where to send it. And then I email it over to you. You can listen to it to your heart's content. You can love it, you can hate it, but either way, you can listen to it for free and not have to worry about it. So,
Well, that's a good way to connect with people too.
Yeah.
Uh, having, I mean, they have the option to purchase the album too, because that album's
Mhm.
actually for sale. So hopefully, the more people that connect can realize, hey, you can save, a couple bucks and
Yeah.
get it for free, and then roast Matt Fawcett all you'd like. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
You can if
Don't
you
do
want
that.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, that's my whole bent in doing music is summed up into pretty much one phrase, and it's comforting the afflicted and confronting the comfortable. And the only way that I have the opportunity to be able to speak into people's lives at all is if I introduce myself. If they don't know who I am, they've never heard me before, that sort of thing. It seems kind of weird to be like, hey, you want to hear my music? All right, cool, go buy my record. Like, I don't know anybody I'd meet on the street that would be like, hey, you want to get to know me? Hand me $10. Like, I don't think so. And honestly, it's been cool to see how even songs on that record that people have listened to for free have really impacted their lives. Because I've had multiple people respond back and say, "Hey, I needed, to hear this at this point in time in my life." And those are things that like I can't direct. God's the one who's behind the scenes doing all that stuff. But it's amazing how something as simple as just putting my heart out on a record for people to listen to can really change people's lives. Again, not because I did something super special. It was more just being willing to do what God's called me to.
Do you have any albums in the works now for the future?
I do. So there's been an idea and a concept that I've had for probably the last 6 to 8 months. That actually my older sister is my graphic designer, so I send her concepts and ideas. She's the one who's designed every record, the banners that I do, all that stuff. My logo, she's done all that and done a phenomenal job. So I actually have had the title of the record for a while, but I'm still writing for it. And the hard part is like in writing for it and trying to record everything, just trying to make sure that I get it right. It takes a lot longer than I want to most of the time. So there's a handful of songs that are ready, um, are getting really close to being ready to release, and I'll probably release a couple of singles first, and then do probably a record towards the end of this year as far as releasing the full thing out. So yeah, there is definitely a lot that's in the works right now. The interesting thing is with like COVID-19, um, it's given some people a lot of free time, and it has done the exact opposite for me. Because, like you were saying earlier, with your church of doing pre-recorded stuff, our church had the same issue with bandwidth on the streaming side of it. Even though we have, faster internet per se where we are, because we knew everybody was going to be trying to stream that first week or first 2 weeks, the servers probably weren't going to be able to handle it. So, and our elders wanted to make sure that we basically made it feel as much like people were sitting in a service as possible by making it just sonically sound good and feel somewhat relatable or normal. And so we were pre-recorded everything, and we've been pre-recording everything for the past 5 weeks now. So that stuff has been, so where typically we would have music practice on like a Tuesday night and then we play Sunday morning for like an hour or whatever. Now we've got recording sessions on Tuesday night, and then I'm mixing and mastering everything to get to our video guys to then send over to them so they can do all their editing stuff. And then on Saturdays, after they do our pastor does his message on Saturdays, he then actually, they bounce that out. I take the recording that our Spanish translators do and mix that stuff and then put it in with the video, marry it back, and stick it back up online. So there's a lot more on my plate now, tech wise, that has nothing to do with my own music, but it's all about serving our church. So some of that stuff is kind of taking a backseat just for the greater good of our body that we meet with, virtually online. So it slowed some of the process down, but honestly, it's helped in a lot of other ways, because a lot of my songs come from just life experience and what God's doing right now in my own life and how I view the world. And so that stuff, even though it seems like it's a distraction, is actually a benefit to me in serving other people and getting a chance to hear their stories and how it's impacting people. And that's literally where all my songs come from.
Yeah, the same concept is based around my EP that I'm writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's written; it just has to be recorded. Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
let's face it, it is written. It just has to be, recorded, then mixed and mastered. But um, the thing that really stood out to me when you're talking about having the audio and mix and mastering it, and then merging it with the video and sending it on,
Mm-hmm.
my my tech team's philosophy
Mm-hmm.
is record it as if it were live.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want that one,
One take.
that one take type deal,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't happen in one take usually. But because when you pre-record it, you can stop and restart.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that live. But
Right.
we ran into an issue last Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, that um, Thursday morning the audio was listened, it was reviewed, and it was not usable
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
various reasons. So I tried to work some magic, maybe with a Paramagic EQ, and try to bring out these frequencies and stuff like that. Yeah, it didn't help.
Yeah.
So it did help for a little bit, but not for the entire thing. So we had to bring the whole band in to re-record that night.
Mm-hmm.
So from last Thursday till whenever we gather live again,
Mm-hmm.
my personal MacBook Pro is going to be recording everything that comes out of the Behringer X32. So if
Smart.
we run into an audio issue, I'll just remix it and you know
Yep.
go from there.
Yeah.
Um, they could potentially do that without me,
Mm-hmm.
if necessary, which is good. And there's other people who can mix it as well.
Mm-hmm.
One person in particular. So it's good to not only be the one person to do
Yeah.
that, but which can be overwhelming for sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was easy. That's why I like Mac computers. You don't have to
Yep.
have issues with drivers like you do with PC. I do own a PC and still use a PC for various things, but not for music and not for video. It's
Yeah.
just plug and play, really. I didn't have to download any drivers and set everything up in Ableton to record everything. Luckily,
Mm-hmm.
stock when you set up your X32 to just send out the local channels,
Yeah.
it's all pre-fader. So
Yeah.
it just, hey, you've got the raw tracks. There's no effects. There's no nothing. It's just whatever's coming in is what's going out USB. You can
Yep.
set it up differently, but that's how we had it set up.
That's how. So I've been using the Waves LV1 Emotion console, and actually, that's funny. The only PC that I use at all for anything is literally for the LV1 to run the software on, so I can have multi-touch on touchscreens, because it's all a software mixer. So there's literally a PC that has a license on it and runs the GUI for it, but all the processing and everything else is happening offline on the Waves Extreme servers that I have. So, and the ironic thing is that PC runs better than the LV1 stuff does on a Mac, even though you can run it on either platform. And I think some of it's just because of the multi-touch stuff, it just seems to work better. But I've been doing that too, to where the first time, and we actually used that console at my church for a while before they ended up buying their own digital console, and they went with D-Live instead. That worked well for what they were trying to do. But I record everything at the input stage. The reason why I do that is because if I want to play things back real quick, I can easily just do a fader or an input flip from what the physical inputs are to what the recorded inputs are, and basically do a virtual playback, but then it's playing back through all the plugins and the processing and everything else, so I can hear just literally what came into the preamp after gain is what's going out to the computer. So if anything clips or I get some weird effects or something like that, that's like, that just did not work. That's part of the reason why I'm mixing everything post afterwards. And we've talked about changing things over because it's been such a time burden on our entire team, is by basically doing a live broadcast style, to where, because we have a video switcher for when the pastor does the live stream stuff, we don't have one, or we don't have access to it, or hadn't had access to it when we were doing the music stuff, because we were doing it. We did it because we have 2 campuses that we're trying to merge down to one once we can sell the one campus. So for the past year, we've been meeting at 2 different locations, have 2 different worship teams. The pastor preaches at one and then drives up to the other. But we have 2 different sets of gear that we're using. And because of that, it's been interesting. So we did the first couple of weeks up at the one campus, and then we started doing some down at the other campus to make people who went to the other campus feel more a part of what's going on. And then our Easter services we do 3 different locations on the one campus. So the first song was in an area that will be the lobby eventually once we sell the other building and get to that building project, with the lights turned down. Then the next song was in the same location with the lights turned up. And then we went into this really beautiful old, what do you call it? It's like a chapel is what it is. So absolutely beautiful, but in a lot of states of disrepair right now, where they're trying to get all the stucco and stuff on the wall repaired. And then did 2 songs there, and then did 1 song outside where you could see the backdrop of the city and everything else behind us, and did that basically as like a music video style thing. But that took 2 weeks to be able to edit that stuff. So we were recording the week beforehand to make sure we always had everything done a week beforehand. Which me and the guy who are doing the video stuff absolutely love doing that. We love serving our church that way. It's just not sustainable. So we talked about doing essentially what you guys are doing, where we're going to shoot it as if it's live and record it. And then if that's the way it happens, I got to work more at getting presets for the board set up, because we've been switching out people in the band too. So literally the first time they show up, we're hitting record, and we typically record everything 3 times. And out of those 3 takes, we usually get 1 that's good enough to be able to then go back, process all the audio and everything else. So it's more work on the front end to make sure it's set and you get it right. And then if everything goes and it's fine, then that's just what it is. So.
Yeah. Presets are very handy. It's just a learning curve when it comes to digital mixers to get everything set up. One thing I liked about the whole thing with Ableton, on the X32, I have a bus set up for the reverb for the vocals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then so I have that set at a certain level, and then I check all the faders for each channel and stuff like that. I just bring them and together, at the same level like that. So everyone's in the same room, same space. And then I was tinkering around with Ableton because the music was fine, thankfully, so I didn't have to do any post editing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, well, let me just look at this real quick. So I created, groups or buses in Ableton.
Yep.
And so here's all the vocals, all dry, just DI tracks, and I grouped them. And I'm like, well, let me put a reverb, which there's tons of reverbs there in Ableton.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that, and I adjusted the wet dry mix down because it was ridiculous when it's at 100%.
Yep.
So it was about 35-40%, and I was like, that sounds pretty good. Everyone's in the same space. Literally, everyone's in the same space.
Yeah.
I need to tinker more with EQs and stuff too, because there's acoustic tracks that come through that just have some harsh frequencies, and the way I was looking at it was like 2.7K or something like that. So I'd have to bring down on a tight Q, a parametric EQ. But it's easier for me on the computer, but it's not that hard to do that on the X32. I just have to tinker around and just mess with it a little bit more.
And on some level, and that's the joy in the benefit of having a digital console, is you have a lot of tools there. Part of the reason why I absolutely love the digital console that I'm using is because I have the because LV1 was built by Waves. You basically have 8 slots. So in some level, it works somewhat like a DAW. You have 8 slots to put whatever Waves plugins you want to at all. So if you wanted to have 8 EQ plugins stacked on top of each other, you totally could. And that's honestly really been pretty slick as far as being able to do a lot of that stuff beforehand. And I did the same thing as far as so the chapel is a highly reverberant space. One of the tricks that I did when we recorded it was I put a microphone, it was a 214, in the room, and it's cardioid. So I just stuck it up in the room facing the opposite direction of where everybody was playing, so that you could actually just get basically the reverb of the entire space. And then I mixed some of that in, and it worked somewhat well. The problem was we're using electronic drums, so you hear a lot of like the pad clicking. So the only real true acoustic instruments that we had was a cello and an acoustic guitar. And then everything else was plugged in via DI or direct. So you heard those two instruments that sounded really good in the vocals, and then a bunch of these pad clicks from a Roland TD kit. So it was just kind of like, well, so what I did and what I've been doing on all my master buses before sending it to the video guys is I'll take a reverb plugin. I think I've been using H Reverb, and literally putting it on the master bus and putting the mix at like 1% or 2%. So it's just enough to be able to give it life. And then when we did it in the chapel, because it's a more highly reverberant space, I ended up pushing that to 15% over the entire mix. And it was literally just to try to give the entire mix that space. But I bus everything out. So like all my drums go to a bus. I have a bus that's specifically just for kick, tom, and snare. I have a cymbal bus, and all that stuff goes to a drum bus. And then you have a kick, snare, and tom kind of crush bus that gets sent to that busing. Then all the vocals get sent to their own bus, guitars to another one, bass to its own, keys to another one. And then I do a lot of the mixing on just the master buses, but then all my instruments, except for vocals, then get summed over into one other final bus. So that, and I usually use, I think it's F6 from Waves to basically is a dynamic EQ, and put it right in the vocal range and just kind of pull down a little bit so that whenever the vocals are singing and sidechain it. So when the vocals are singing through, it basically just pulls the instruments just out of the way a little bit more. So I can kind of get those two, the vocals and the music, to actually kind of blend in a little bit more without having to fight as much on just levels between the two. So that as soon as the singing's done and there's an instrumental section or anything else, it puts it right back in there and it doesn't feel like there's this huge gap.
In case anyone's wondering that may watch this later, if you stuck with me for 47 minutes, I'm here to tell you thank you very much, because this is high techie, and we enjoy high techie around here.
That's right.
The LV1 that you're using, is it which
Yeah.
one, the 32 or 64 or 16? What?
So I'm using the 64, but I've been running it in 32 channel mode. So the way the licensing stuff works is if you get the 64 channel, you can run it in 32 or 16. So just depending on who's there and then what server I'm plugged into. Usually I don't need more than 32, so I just run it in 32 to give my server more headroom for more plugins. But we did an acoustic set the other day, and I was using a smaller server, so I ran it in 16 channel mode.
All right. So this is software, and is this standalone software or made to use in Ableton or what?
So it's standalone.
This is the first I've ever seen it, so that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's standalone software. So there's a couple components you need to get it to run. So you almost have to think of it like if X32 was pieced out the same way, you would have your X32 software, which is basically the brain. You have to have a computer, which is the physical side of things with the X32, and then you have to have the I/O, which is going to be the physical inputs. So the way LV1 works is the software just runs off your own computer, whether it's a Mac or a PC. And the benefit of that is if you're running on PC, you have 10-point control touch. So my control surface is literally two 22-inch screens that are a clamshell type thing. So I've got one screen above the other, and then you can move those around, but then you can buy however powerful a PC you want to. And then the server is what determines how many plugins or how big of a session you can have. And then your I/O boxes, you can pick and choose what you want. So they've got some that are literally 2 in or 4 in, 4 out style boxes that you can use and drop somewhere, all the way up to, I think it's a DS Pro has a 48 by 16 channel stage box. And then you just connect everything through Cat5. So it's a networked audio system, which is cool then, because you can start with the software, a server, and one individual rack unit, like the IOX that gives you 12 inputs and 4 headphone outs and 6 direct outs or line outputs. You can start with that, and then literally build up to a 64 by 64 input unit if you wanted to, and just move them around wherever they need to be.
Are you saying that the learning curve on this software can give you a hernia?
No, honestly, so this is the crazy part. So my church, this is a year ago when they bought the campus. They were going to fix up and they wanted to move everybody to. We split the church kind of in half, and half of us went down to that campus. Well, they had no equipment to do Sunday morning services at all, and they only had a limited budget. So they basically bought the PA for it and the mics, and the mixer was all mine. So the first week I ended up leading worship, and one of our other tech guys had to run my console for Easter Sunday, and we had 2 practices beforehand. So within 2 practices, while I was leading, I was able to get him up and running fast enough to where he actually ran the console for the first service, and he'd never been on that console before in his life. So the learning curve for it is actually pretty easy to get around. I mean, because it's software, we all kind of understand how like a DAW works. So if you understand a DAW, it's pretty simplistic, but it's a little bit more controlled. So we're Ableton, you can choose how many tracks you have or how many buses, and you create those as you go. LV1 starts off with, so if you have a 16 channel deal, you only have 16 faders. Like that's the only number of inputs you can have, and you're limited on your outputs. So if you have a 64 channel and you're only using 16 channels or 32, you'll have a lot more things that are there, but you can see them all. And that's part of the reason why I love it, is because some digital consoles that have banks of faders and everything else can actually be a little bit more difficult to get around just because things can hide. Where LV1, because it's on a computer screen and it's touchscreen, like you can get to everything either on the top or on the side and be able to see all your inputs and everything else that's going on too. So it seems complicated. And honestly, if somebody's on an analog desk and this is their first foray into it, like don't run Sunday services the next time you like buy the license and then run it next week. Like don't do that. But if you want something that, and you can actually get, I think it's like a 30-day trial version of it off of Waves. But it's a really slick console. A lot of churches are using them for doing live stream stuff to where they'll have their main desk and then set up a Waves SoundGrid network or a Dante network, send all the inputs over to the LV1 because it runs off of a computer like it does a DAW, and literally process all their audio that way before it goes to the live stream. And instead of having to buy a second desk or have a lot more space, you could literally do it off of a laptop if you wanted to. And then maybe a 2U chassis next to you because you have to have the servers in there. So, and you only need one server. The second server is redundant, but
I can't remember the brand of the main mixer, the front of house mixer that we have. But yeah, we do it. We just split everything, and the X32 gets its own thing like that, and so live broadcasting is totally independent of front of house, which is cool. But we could have potentially done that with the exact same thing without having to get all that other stuff. I was over here looking at a website with all this stuff, and it's fascinating. My only side question on the LV1 is, can you add third-party VSTs to a channel?
Not currently. So it is locked down pretty much to Waves SoundGrid plugins. So the cool part is if you have the Mercury bundle, which is I think on most everybody's dream list if they're doing recorded audio at all, you can use all those same plugins. So the cool part is because Waves they've been popular in doing live broadcast or just live sound in general for a long time. But usually the way it works is you have your desk and then you set up a network, send it out, and then you have to do all your processing in the Waves plugins and then send it back into the desk. And that's how it finishes out the routing stuff. And with LV1, it literally is all just in the desk. So you don't have to send stuff out and send it back in. But yeah, right now, and they used to have it opened up on like version 9 a while back to where certain third party, as long as they were SoundGrid compatible, would work. It'll be interesting to see if they kind of go back on that and allow people to do the SoundGrid like protocol, kind of like so VST, AAX, RTAS, which well, that's an old one, but audio units, like all those different plugin formats. SoundGrid is another plugin format that's been out there for a long time. And they gave it, like anybody who wants it can develop specifically for it. I think a lot of plugin manufacturers just didn't jump on it. But the benefit is then the processing happens on the Waves server. So even if you're using it in the studio, it's taking processing off your computer and running on an external server so that you can run more plugins. And it's super low latency too. It's like 0.8 milliseconds or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane.
Well, so all this it helps to lead tech savvy worship, and basically, what the point of tech savvy worship is, whether your song is about a testimony or if it's about how awesome God is, or his capabilities or anything like that. If it's worship centered,
Mm-hmm.
then all this technology, Ableton Live, LV1, Behringer X32, having a crew to be able to do this, that, and the other, or have it completely automated on your computer.
Yep.
The point is to get to the point of worship quicker and very efficiently.
Yep.
And so it's just, we are so blessed with technology right now. So blessed with technology.
Yep.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How is everything going? And I understand you're busy with extra steps for mixing and producing the music for church.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take that aspect out, and any private work you might be doing from home or anything like that. How is everything going with you and your family, and you still wanting to still doing live streams and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's been good. My wife is amazing, and my kids are too. I've got three. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 9-month-old, which keep me pretty busy. And honestly, like the live streaming aspect of it, part of the reason why it's so special to me and why I've been doing the lunch break stuff is literally because it allows me the opportunity to serve other people while still serving my family. I did one gig last year that literally I was in the car for 16 hours over 48-hour period. So I got up Saturday morning, drove out to Leesburg, Virginia, played a show, got back in the car, drove back through the night, and actually got stuck on the side of the road because my car broke down, and spent literally all day Sunday renting a U-Haul, putting the car on the back of the trailer, driving it back home, and then emptying the car out, driving in another hour to the only trusted car shop that I knew in Indiana, dropping the car off there, then driving the U-Haul back. And I stopped driving after 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. I stopped driving at 8 p.m. on Sunday night. And that was all for a 2-hour gig in Leesburg, Virginia. And I wouldn't trade it for anything because honestly, the people we met there were awesome. And the ability to be able to speak into people's lives is totally worth whatever it costs to do it. But doing that on a consistent basis robs my family of their dad and their husband. So being able to do live streaming helps me still be able to reach people using technology, but still maintains my relationship as being a father and a husband to my family, which I think God's called us to first and foremost before we go out and seek other people. Now, there's a balance between holding your family up, I think, too high and you seeing it as an idol to where you don't go serve other people versus completely ignoring them and being worse than an unbeliever by ignoring your family and just serving other people. So there's definitely a balance and a tension with those two things there, but live streaming has definitely helped me balance that tension better because I then feel like I can actually do what God's called me to without constantly being on the road and not being a husband and a father like I need to be.
Yeah, balance is good.
Yeah.
And
the tough part about balance is there's always balance checks. So there will be times when you just lean in too far one way or the other. And I mean, my wife is awesome at that. She's really good at being able to look at me and say, "You're doing too much." And that is easy in a prideful sense to look at it and be like, no, but like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like, no, my wife is supposed to be a helper to me. If she's telling me I'm doing too much, all right, I need to listen, back off a little bit and look through her eyes and see how she's seeing things to make sure that, yeah, okay, I do need to pull back and make sure that what I'm doing is sustainable, both for my family and for ministry.
There's 2 words that describe that.
Yeah.
Being humble.
Yeah. Yep. And you can either work on it yourself or allow God to make you humble.
Yeah. I believe wholeheartedly in Hebrews chapter 12, discipline of the Father. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yep.
So I appreciate your time
Yeah, man.
and for joining the PNW podcast. I hope and pray that anyone that watches this can see that there is a big picture of technology, big, vast world of technology they can use to help further their gospel-centered ministry. And it's not as overwhelming as people might think. It's just bite-sized portions, and then you can learn and grow to help be more effective as a worship leader. Because anybody who is involved on stage or behind the scenes as a part of that ministry, whether it's for Matt Fawcett Music or for a worship team at a church or anything like that, it's all for this ought to be for the same purpose, which is spreading the gospel and spreading the love of God with everyone, so that they can hear and hopefully embrace the gospel into their lives.
Yeah. And I will say this, like in that vein, the reason why my rig is the way it is and the reason why I do things is because when I worked in camp ministry, I literally was a program director, a lifeguard, and the tech director all at the same time. So I would go from lifeguarding to then running over to try to set stuff up, to then try to run back to dinner, to then go finish setting things up, and then lead worship, and then close things out, and then make sure the counselors. So there was just too much going on. And it took me 45 minutes minimum to set all that stuff up at the same time. And it switched my brain around to, instead of just like, there's a cost for time. And when I set my rig up, even though it's just myself, I want to be able to put on the best performance I can to be able to reach people and show them that I genuinely care about you. So I put in a ton of effort to make this night happen, but I'm also going to do it in a way to where it takes me less time to set up and tear down, so I can spend more time intentionally talking with people. And that's how we do things at church as well. I want to be able to set up and tear down as quickly as possible, not just so my life is easier, but so I can spend more time literally creating relationships with people, because that's what it's really all about.
So then I guess the most important thing to say is you're fueled by God, the indwelling Holy Spirit within you, fueling you. You're fueled by support from your wife and your family. So as the hierarchy would go of level of priorities, would be God first, then your wife, and then your kids, and then the ministry.
Yep.
So where does coffee sit up in that?
Coffee is kind of the fluid that goes through all those things all together.
This is not a gimmick. This is actually a Matt Fawcett cup. These are available. Can you go ahead and talk about your website, please?
Yeah. So if you go to mattfawcettmusic.com, I have a journal entry stuff that I do up there. So I write a bunch of thoughts, and that's where all my music hangs out. If you want to have me come out and do either a house show or play at your church or a coffee shop or anything like that, you can send me messages through there. There's a booking spot on the page. You can hear more about what I do, what ministries I'm a part of, like MAP International. But you can also buy merchandise like the coffee mug. I've got t-shirts on there as well, and CDs and stickers. So there's a lot of stuff on there that you can go and check out for sure. The Caffeine I Need You stuff is, I did a parody of...
Oops. Hang on. I done messed that up.
Oh, you're good.
There we go. I was switching presets. I was going to be funny, but I guess it didn't work out.
So I did a parody back working in camp ministry of Lord, I Need You. And I changed it to Caffeine I Need You because our counselors, we always told, would be addicted to coffee by the time they finished week 2. And so that song was super popular. So one day I just sat down and was like, this kind of fit. So I played it during staff meeting one time, and everybody kind of lost it. So it's stuck around quite a bit.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites for sure. A friend of mine posted a video, or not a video, a meme on Facebook, and it was like the human body. It had an outline of the human body,
Yeah.
and at the 80% point, it said H2O, which is it's true. We're made up of a lot of water.
Yep.
And then it had another drawing with like a brown color, the whole thing, and it said PhD, and then it was coffee.
Yep.
So yeah, coffee definitely helps fuel it. I had a professor in seminary say it's the nectar of life's existence.
Yep. Pretty much. I mean, it
So
definitely keeps us fueled.
yeah. All right. Well, again, I appreciate you very much for your
Yeah.
time. If anyone's got any more questions or anything, you can leave comments on this video. Please, please, please share this video because that P&W guy is a very, very small YouTube channel that is just now. This is Ep.3 of the P&W podcast, so it's just getting started, really. And hopefully, this will bless anyone that watches it to keep your focus on God and
Yeah.
use the tools that we have to help further that ministry of sharing the gospel. Father God, we come to you today, Lord, so grateful for this day that you've given us, Lord God. You've allowed us to wake up today, Lord. You've given us a purpose, Lord God. I just pray for the strength to do everything we can to fulfill that purpose and to glorify you through loving you first and loving our neighbor second as ourselves, Lord God. Thank you so much for this podcast and the information shared, Lord. I hope it blesses somebody that may have been curious about something else that they might could use, Lord God, in their setting, Lord, to just film and get the audio that they want and send it out, Lord. Lord, I also pray for all those that are affected by COVID-19, Lord God. There's jobs that are affected, there's home lives that are affected, and of course the people who actually have COVID-19, Lord God. I just pray for relief from this, Lord, and I pray that we'd all be able to continue to come together, Lord God, in the midst of this isolation, to focus on ourselves, on how you'd have us to be, Lord, to be able to conform to the way you'd have us be because of the renewing of our mind and not to this world, Lord God. And it's in your Son's name, Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right.